Okay, well, we are going to do album number one right now. We're going to cover Veruca Salt, American Thighs. In the opener, you heard Seether, and now you're going to hear Victrola. Okay, Matt, give me the numbers, please.
All right, Veruca Salt's American Thighs comes in at number 2,132 in the 1990s on Best Ever Albums. Number 224, 1994. Jeez, number 12,735 of all time. It's Veruca Salt's highest rated album on Best Ever Albums. It did not make Rolling Stone's list. And Veruca Salt ranked number 4,295 of all-time artists on Best Ever Albums.
Well, that tracks, Matt, because much like fellow Chicagoan Liz Phair, this band took a lot of shit that some attributed to them being women along the way. Now, it's funny because in some ways they like their fellow Chicagoans, Smashing Pumpkins, got called out for being derivative. That was the thing that they got knocked for a lot by others, or appropriating other better versions of the music they were playing was a knock they got quite a bit. And then there were some other things that were sort of looked at as being more sexist kind of, and the feminine, space in rock. So they got a little bit of like the Liz Phair criticism too. So it's interesting that all that Chicago scene seems a little toxic. If I'm being honest, there seem like a lot of fucking scenesters, and that more so than even like New York and London, which is kind of crazy in some ways. But maybe that's why Chicago's the second city, right, and not the first city, because it's a little childish there. But anyway, well, first of all, guys, before I get into the band, do you guys know what Veruca Salt was named after? I do, but
Yes.
let's see if you guys
Willy
do.
Wonka.
You got it, Willy Wonka. Did you know that, Matt? That
How could I not know that? Of course I did.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yep. Veruca Salt, for those that don't know, was the spoiled girl in Willy Wonka's Chocolate Factory, not to be confused with Violet Blue. Was that
Violet Beauregard.
What was Violet Beauregard? Right, and that was the one who blew up like a blueberry. At the
Chewed
end,
a lot of
yes.
gum. Yes.
Chewed a lot of gum. Yes. So Roald Dahl, he wrote a lot of books with kids in it, and kind of really hated kids too.
Terrible
so
things happen to these
which
kids.
is why it's
Only
kind
to
of
the bad kids, to be fair.
I think where do we stand on that band name? I think it's a good band name,
Oh,
personally.
great
for
band.
I'm a
Salt.
fan. Sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Also, I'm a fan of
especially-
American Thighs as an album title.
American Thighs, an album title. Yes, and their second album was Eight Arms to Hold You, which I'm sure Matt knows that reference, right?
Eight Arms to Hold You. Yes. Where do I know that from? God. Oh, it's the Beatles. It was supposed to be Help.
Yes.
It was supposed to be the
Yes,
title of Help.
you got it. You nailed it, Matt. It was going to be the title for Help.
Nice.
So that's
My
the
night
name.
tonight, guys.
Well done. You're on.
Got it.
You're on it. So this version of Veruca Salt, which I think is funny because when Nina Gordon leaves the band later, they call the second version of it Veruca Starship, which made me laugh, but not formally. But that's before they reunited. That's what they
that's
called the version without Nina Gordon. I found that very funny.
I love these ladies. That's awesome.
Yes. So Veruca Salt was founded by co-guitarist and vocalist Nina Gordon. She's the blonde, for those looking at a picture, and Louise Post, dark-haired. Drummer Jim Shapiro, who is actually a sibling of one of the members of the band. We'll get to that in a little bit. And bassist Steve Lack. And I think a lot of people listening may best know Veruca Salt for this album from Seether, which was the single off of this album and received heavy airplay on MTV. They also had another top 10 hit on the alternative charts from their second album, Eight Arms to Hold You, called Volcano Girls, which was there. Some people said it was a little bit of a rewrite of Seether, but anyway, top 10. They've had multiple other albums. Their most recent one was released in 2015, Ghost Notes, and they play live fairly regularly. I think Josh and I went to go see Veruca Salt, if I remember correctly.
It was me.
Right?
Yeah,
it was
I do not
Matt. Okay, I
remember
wasn't
that.
sure. Okay, it was Matt. It was Matt and I went to go see Veruca Salt.
I was wearing my
apologize.
Josh mask that night, though, so I could see why
sorry.
you were thrown off.
Anyway, there we go with that. So Veruca Salt was formed in Chicago in 1992 by the two female lead guitarists and singers. They were actually introduced through a mutual friend, Lily Taylor. You may know her from the movies Say Anything and Mystic Pizza, Josh. And I
yes.
remember being advertised on the pay-per-view channel near us when I was young. But yes, she was an actress and she was friends with them. And they began playing music together. And they actually played together as like a folk group for a while as they were writing songs. It evolves relatively quickly to them taking on a rock sound, but also it evolves relatively quickly because they form in 92 and they're on MTV in 1994. So they've got like a quick turnaround, not the likes of which we haven't seen since those days of like punk bands, right? Where they like went to a show and then 6 months later they're releasing like, give them enough rope, like The Clash or something. You know what I mean? It's like 6 months after they form, they're making music. Not quite as quick here, but kind of comes together quickly. Jim Shapiro, who I mentioned before, was Nina Gordon's brother, so he's on the drums, so it was a family affair. And Steve Lack joins. Gordon and Post wrote the songs. The two of them were the songwriters, but what was interesting is they didn't really collaborate on the songs. There was a little bit of overlap from time to time, but they mostly wrote their own songs, sort of individually. That worked real well at the beginning, and then they had a pretty big fallout at the end of it, which led to that Veruca Starship period, like before they kind of buried the hatchet later in life and are back on good terms and touring for a while. So they'd only done a handful of shows when a gentleman by the name of Jim Powers with Minty Fresh Records, which was considered kind of like a pretty cool record label based out of Chicago. The two big finds early in Minty Fresh's career were Veruca Salt and the Cardigans, a band that we'll cover in this decade as well. Also a female-fronted band. And Jim Powers asked them to sign on their label. And pretty much they go into the studio with the same producer that Liz Phair had as well. So they basically brought Brad Wood in, who did Exile in Guyville. And they released the album, and the first single is Seether with All Hail Me on the back of it. And it gets word of mouth pretty quick, which makes sense because it's a very catchy song. And it makes its way onto radio and alternative radio. MTV puts them on. They're a pretty photogenic band. They also opened for Hole on the era of like Hole with Doll Parts, right? So like right when Courtney Love is breaking into the mainstream as well. And as this is coming out on Minty Fresh, they also cut a major label deal with Geffen, who actually re-released the album as a Geffen album. So it was released as a Minty Fresh album, and it was released as a Geffen album as well. Pretty much as meteoric as their rise was, that was also when they started getting criticism a lot from, the hippest of hip areas, kind of saying that they were just basically rip-off artists of better bands, that they used Minty Fresh as a way to get popular, just a way to get to like a major record label. And they kind of entered an interesting thing where their popularity did not match necessarily their critical acclaim, that they'd kind of gotten into that area. It actually, their story is very similar to Bush in that way. In that they were kind of like a band that played live a lot, and they were popular, but they didn't really get a lot of critical acclaim. And much like Bush did for their second album, they also went and found a top producer for their second album. In this case, Steve Albini produced their second album, Blow It Out Your Ass. It's Veruca Salt, which was sort of known for being a little bit more of a metal album, like harder rock album. Than this album was. And I know we're going to cover, I don't think the entire album, but I think we're going to do a single off of that as well. So Shapiro did leave the band after the second album and was replaced by the former drummer from Letters to Cleo, who we covered in the singles with Here and Now, Stacey Jones. And then sort of rumors came out that Nina Gordon and Louise Post were feuding, and Nina Gordon actually quit in 1998 to pursue a solo career. Post kept the band together with sort of a revolving array of musicians. Also, pretty famously had a relationship with Dave Grohl for a while, and that relationship ended. And the album 2000 Resolver was the not Revolver, Resolver, which staying with that Beatles theme, Matt, right there. Came out at that as their third album. They never really got back to the the success commercially that the first album, and to a lesser extent their second album, did. But they did reunite in 2013, brought back the original lineup, and released an album and toured afterwards. So all was good afterwards. And that, I think, is where I'm going to leave. That is the Veruca Salt story. Matt, why don't we have you go first? Thoughts on American Thighs by Veruca Salt.
Yeah, and they reunited so you and I could go see them, John, in Washington, D.C.
Good show, too.
It was a good show, and I remember being at that show going, I'm surprised at the sound, because I really just knew them through their singles. I never had any of their records. And I remember us talking about it, and I was going, man, this, or either you said it first, or they're sludgier than what you would think that they would be. And I was like, yeah, they definitely were. Like they're heavier too, right? See, there's a great song. Okay, so see, that is a great guitar riff, really catchy, easy to see why that was so popular. And it starts right off the bat. Not hard to see why it's a good song. But there's certainly heavier elements to this. Like a song like All Hail Me, it's just like, it's a deeper, heavier sound, and it's kind of surprising because there's not really like that. So the rest of this album, I wouldn't say it's all like a sludgy type album, but there's definitely elements throughout here that are like that, which makes it interesting. It also, I was definitely reminded of like some Kim Gordon, Pixies, Breeders, Belly type stuff. Like
for
it
sure,
kind of got a little bit of a certainly with the female, kind of a higher pitched female vocal styling that Kim Gordon and Tanya Donnelly do use sometimes. There's some elements of this album that are a little bit more, kind of stripped down, like a song like 25 or Fly, that, kind of bring the tone down a little bit. And it's kind of a little, maybe, I don't want to say it's not experimental, but it's a little bit more of an avant-garde kind of sound. It's a little atonal at times. Probably not as much as like what Kim Deal does, but still kind of in that vein. So I was definitely thinking of that. But I think this album starts off very strong. I think the first probably 6 songs are ones that I'm all like, yep, I'm totally in on this. And so the second half I would say is not as strong, but it's still pretty good. It's a little bit on the longer side. It's like over 50 minutes long, so you're kind of delving into the getting to the too long territory, but I wouldn't say that this album is too long. It's probably doesn't need to be any longer than it is. I don't know if 25 needs to be an 8-minute long song, but whatever, I'm nitpicking here. Overall, I thought this was really good. I like the female vocal stylings. I like the attitude. All these stories make me laugh, these names, not just the Beatles stuff, but they're just funny. They seem like they're having a good time with this stuff, and it's got this Gen X vibe to it as well. This kind of and Liz, it doesn't surprise me that the Liz Phair, the producer here, would you say Brad Wood is on this. There's some similarities there, so I kind of like that that female Gen X vibe that is being thrown out there. And I don't know, man, I get sick of people. Like I'm saddened to hear that there was so much backlash against them for being derivative or doing copying stuff. It's like, come on, just. Yes, okay, they're not doing anything different.
There's a lot of dudes who hated themselves in that era, man. That's what I'm coming to realize in retrospect. Yeah.
There's a lot of latent misogyny, I think, in some of these takes back then.
It's just, come on. I mean, because, again, I go back, and we've talked about this in recent weeks, but yes, you can be derivative, but that doesn't mean that it's automatically bad. You can be, it's still hard to write a catchy, good song, right, or a great riff, and it's all over the place here. I think that's dumb. I think that is a little short-sighted. You want to knock this for not being as original as some other bands? Fine, okay. But that's not the only reason that you listen to. You don't always need to be, reinventing something or being the next new sound or whatever. Right. You can kind of stay in a lane that is a really good lane, that's popular, that's won over people for years and years, and it's just a great sound and still really enjoy it. So I like this. I probably listened to it about 4 times this week, and I'd like to listen to it some more. I would go back to it. So yeah, thumbs up. It's good stuff.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I really liked this album. That was the thing that surprised me as well, was just like that hard, kind of fuzzy, distorted guitar sound that kind of permeates throughout the album right from the opening track. I really like the fact I wasn't familiar with them outside of the singles, Seether and Volcano Girls, and I really like I think it's it's unique enough that they have two female singers that both sing. Like in a rock band, that's kind of that rise to that level. That's more than enough with along with the talent that they have to make this a worthwhile band to listen to, especially back then. I think they have. I really like when they harmonize throughout the album and in the choruses or on a song like Forsythia. That was really great. I like they have like a whoa 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 part on Spider-Man 79 that's really great too. And I think besides the fact that the hard guitar works really well, I think they have a really good ability to craft like pop hooks to some of these songs, especially besides either like Number One Blind. I like the chorus on that. Victrola, that was a good choice, Matt, on the song. That's like a short and sweet 2.5 minute song that works really well. And even Twin Star, which is also on the back end of the album, I really like that. That's a slower song, but there is something like really appealing about it that I like. And overall, it's just a great rock album. And the is it? I don't know if it's as sludgy as like Soundgarden, but like it's a different take on it, and I think it still has kind of like a peppy, upbeat, kind of like undercurrent, I think, to it that works really well. And this is a very listenable album. I didn't like 25. I guess that would be the one quibble. I felt out of place and kind of more experimental or something, that they were trying for that felt tacked on. But everything else I really like on this album, so thumbs up.
Yeah, this is another one of those albums that I feel like they have really good taste in who they like, because even though they're doing homages, most of the people they're doing homages to are people I really like. And 25 is definitely, I think, their attempt to do sort of Sonic Youth light, right? A little bit, the extended version. There's some feedback in there that's not on some of the other tracks. As Matt mentioned, there's some songs that are very close to being Pixies songs, like very, very close. Number One Blind comes to mind immediately. Forsythia is another one that has a Pixies feel to it. Belly is a good comparison as well, Matt, and I think some of that is, the heavier guitar, but also the very feminine singing style, which you don't hear very often in like heavy music, which I always like the contrast there. And then you throw in that both Louise Post and Nina Gordon have voices that sound similar enough that they can blend together, but also have enough differences that you can pick them apart, both when they're singing together or when they're singing their individual parts, which I always liked about them as harmonizers. You can see that they could have started as a folk group with how they sing their choruses, because if you strip the guitars out of this, it could be folk structure as songs. The other thing that I love about this is the big, dumb, awesome, sludgy guitar riffs all over this, which is it's like Kiss, you know what I mean? Just big old riffs, that just hit you over the head, that it doesn't need to be virtuoso. It just like hits you right in your innards. And I always love it. It always feels a little bit edgier when like women, and in particular like women who are unabashedly singing in a feminine way, are combined with sort of this like heavy, like sludgy guitar. I don't know what it is, but that mix of like sweet and sour kind of, I guess would be a way to put it, is a really good mix for me historically. And and I mean, I get why people who are looking for something to spark them would say that they thought it was derivative, but like, once again, like Matt, just because something has homages to stuff that you can identify doesn't mean that I think it's not worthwhile. And they're doing things that are taking the form of what this is, and they're reinventing it with different pieces, right? Like two different singers and, softer choruses than the songs normally have, very pretty voices as opposed to the normal sort of abrasive voice that you hear sing over it, or soaring voices. So there's twists on the theme along with this, and there's a sense of humor, and like winking humor. Like I think of that the one song where they talk about the dandelion and the pussy willow and stuff like that. It makes me chuckle like every time I saw it, because there's a lot loaded into those lyrics. Like in a hidden way. So I appreciated like the feminism of this album, but the feminism couched in like postmodern feminism. I'd say that like second wave or is it third wave feminism? The one that's sort of tried to attach itself by not necessarily like, I think it was defined by like not being afraid of sex, right, and not being like anti wanting men's attention, you know what I mean, but also definitively like I am a woman who's smart and have my own entity, you know what I mean. It blended those themes together, and I feel like we're right in that peak of music right now, because a lot of the female musicians that we're talking about, that's sort of their themes. It's like, I don't want to be like, I want the male gaze, right? But I absolutely want the male gaze on my terms, not your fucking terms. You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of like what they're looking for, which I always find cool and healthy. And that's probably how it should be. So, end of tangent there. But yeah, thumbs up for me, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, good stuff all around.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.